Coming up on this week's show, will we finally get Speedball 3? The Bitmap brothers are back.
New Super Mario Land is ported to the SNES.
And we chat retro gaming with the original Stadium Rave act, Utah Saints.
This week's show is brought to you by Retro Gamer, the essential guide to classic games. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 201. Your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to this week's podcast. Now, we do just have to say, last week we got all the, the backslapping and the hugging and the self-praise and all out the way. We are now into the 200s, but we did just want to say a big welcome because last week's show did do particularly well, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, it was awesome seeing us up there with Gardener's Question Time and all the other big shows in the kind of leisure category, which they now have on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, except we had Charlie Brooker on, obviously, last week. I'm sure you've heard it by now. Probably the biggest episode of the show we've ever done. We nearly doubled our audience last week, so there's a lot of new people who probably come into the show this week, if they hung around after it, that is. So I thought we'd just do a little introduction. We appreciate everyone that listens every week as well. You probably know. I'm Dan. I host the show. I kind of tie it all together. Big fan, lifelong fan of video games. Mainly a bit of a computer kind of background, but, love the console stuff too. Ravi's our real, proper tech nerd, isn't he?
Yeah, big time.
I'm into the coding and I love getting guests on the show and kind of researching and doing all that really nerdy stuff.
I always feel like Ravi's like the dodgy one as well. He always knows everything about how to copy games and how to pirate things and stuff
I know
like that.
I know the hacks.
He knows all the hacks.
If this house ever gets raided, he'll just vanish one day.
They won't be able to work it out. They'll be like, what's this old system?
And Joe, our console lord, who also wears leather trousers.
What? Leather trousers.
Brings a rock and roll aspect to the show.
I bring the rock and roll aspect to the show, apparently. But I don't wear leather trousers. But I guess I'm the console kind of guy, the 16-bit, 8-bit, 32-bit guy.
And you're in a metal band. You should wear leather trousers.
I don't wear leather trousers, but yeah, I'm in a metal band as well.
Oh, what you wear? I can't see below the
I'm
desk.
just wearing normal black jeans.
He's wearing Y fronts. I don't even bother to get dressed. So, if you are new to the podcast, we come out every Friday. Welcome on board. And to everyone that's been there for the last 201 episodes, as it will be now, great to have you back again. Now, this week, following on from Charlie Brooker, a nice little start to the 200s, actually. We're keeping it going with, you can say, another couple of celebrity guests this week.
Yeah, we're not taking our foot off the accelerator here. We've got some absolutely amazing guests. Utah Saints, one of the kind of greatest stadium rave acts. In the 90s, these guys were the original guys that went mental with samples.
Yeah.
And they got top 10 hits, but they did it all with an Atari ST. So it's going to be a really interesting talk. They were involved in a lot of gaming systems, stuff like the Philips CDI launch. They also were involved with the Mortal Kombat soundtrack. So that's pretty awesome.
Joe loves his video game movies.
I do love video game movies. There you go. There's a little bit more about me.
Is Mortal Kombat one of your favourite films?
Love it. The first one.
Yeah. Well, these guys, you hear at the end of the film, actually, Utah Saints did a track in there. Stuff like, Wipeout, Carmageddon as well. Interesting you mentioned the Philips CDI launch they were involved in too, because that's quite an interesting story. And they are big video game fans too, so we're going to really nerd out about retro gaming and get some stories. Because what I love doing is, we get people on like Utah Saints and Charlie Brooker, for example. People don't naturally associate them with video games. But I think there is, as we kind of said last week, a lot of these kind of closet gamers out there have actually got a really interesting history.
Well, you sit there and you watch some of their music videos and they've got the virtual reality headsets on, they've got references to titles and stuff, and it's all around that kind of gaming culture, but a lot of it's been forgotten because, it was back in the days and there was so much good stuff coming out at the time. You don't notice these tiny little details.
And even their videos looked a lot like kind of demo rave.
Oh,
demo
yeah.
Stuff,
Even the logo, the Utah
Yeah.
Saints logo would spin around and it would go in and out of it, kind of like a gaming demo.
So make sure you hang around for this, a really good one. Tim and Jez from the Utah Saints are going to be our special guests on the show in around 15 minutes from now. Now, before we get into the news, there's some really good stories that we need to talk about this week. Every week on the show, we bring you up to date with what's been happening in the world of retro gaming, along with a special guest. But we want to give a big thank you to a very loyal supporter of the Retro Hour podcast, and something we're a massive fan of as well, and this is our very good friends at the legendary, holding it in my hand here, Retro Gamer magazine. Now, Retro Gamer, of course, the only monthly magazine that you can walk in, pick it up off the high street. I love the fact that you can walk in at WH Smith or Asda or, little newsagent at the train station or whatever and pick up a copy of a magazine dedicated to our favourite hobby in the world, to retro gaming. Now, they give you exclusive access to classic developers, giving you behind-the-scenes stories about these games and these systems that you grew up playing, speak to the biggest names in the industry about this legacy they've left, and also get to revisit your favourite games of all time and uncover things you didn't know about them. Now, at the moment, their 200th issue is on the shelves. And one thing I love about Retro Gamer as well is, not only these incredible articles and reviews and making-ofs that they do, but also the opinion pieces. Now, Ian Lee, who is, he's a well-known celeb in the UK, he, again, is one of these kind of closet retro gamers. If you're in the retro gaming scene, you'll know that he is. But people who watched him at like the 11 o'clock show and stuff like that probably
Yeah,
wouldn't.
I remember he did a great documentary called Fun Candy and also Fun Bandits, of course, on Channel 4.
And he was on I'm Celeb, Get Me Out of Here as well. But actually he does a column every month in Retro Gamer. And this month he's talking about the fact that he's only just played Tetris for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And obviously, he's done documentaries before with Alexei Pajitnov, the guy behind Tetris, and completely lied to him, said it was one of his favourite games ever. He only just played it for the first time this month.
Yeah, because that was the actual documentary we mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember the clip where you was showing him kind of the little tetronomes that it was based on.
Well, he hadn't played it till this month. If you read this month's edition of Retro Gamer, you'll find out.
Winging it the whole time.
And Mr. Biffo, he's talking in there, this is a really interesting opinion piece, about the fact that console design today sucks. And he's talking about, the legendary look of like the Mega Drive and the PS1. And then he gets stuff like the Xbox One. It's a boring slab.
Yeah, game consoles back in the day, they had a real, you knew it was a game console. They even had that like wood look to them or that futuristic, inverted commas, 90s look to them. And now they just look like a Blu-ray player or a DVD player. They could just
I
be
think the GameCube was the coolest
Yeah,
last one.
you just don't get anything like that anymore, do you?
Well, he's even talking about the fact, you had that text around the Mega Drive, high definition,
Yeah,
all
exactly.
like sexiness that was on there. They also got a feature in here about bedroom coding, and being the 200th issue, there's a timeline of gaming from the 1960s onwards, starting at the creation of Space War, the first true video game, interviews with the guys like Al Acorn, Nolan Bushnell, so it is a real collector's edition if you're a fan of video games. Now, we want to give you a little offer because we think you should be reading Retro Gamer magazine. So just for listeners of the Retro Hour podcast, this is what I want you to do. You can subscribe today and get a free 8-bit DOE controller of your choice. Now these are really sexy. These are Bluetooth controllers, 6 different editions to choose from, including NES, GameCube, Mega Drive or Game Boy editions. And you can play these on systems like your Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
Which is really cool because there's a lot of retro games on the Switch.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect controller for the games. They've recently added on a bunch of SNES games in the last couple of months as well, so perfect for that.
Or if you emulate on your PC, your Mac, works on them, Linux, Android, Switch. So we want to give you 6 months of Retro Gamer, which is cheaper than you'll get it in the newsagents, just 25 quid, and also will include a beautifully retro-style Bluetooth controller worth £30 normally, absolutely free. So claim this right now while it's on. All you got to do is nip onto this website, myfavouritemagazines.co.uk/retro 8-bit DOE. That is retro, number 8, BITDO, myfavouritemagazines.co.uk/retro 8-bit DOE with Retro Gamer, the essential guide to classic games.
And I'd just like to say before we go into the news, thank you for everybody that came to see us in Firsk in Yorkshire. We had a really cool little panel that we did, and guys bought us presents and stuff.
Yeah, that was amazing.
It was so nice, and we've recorded it and we're going to put it on YouTube over Christmas.
You know what I absolutely loved about it as well? A guy came up to us, a really lovely guy called Jonah, I think his name was, and he gifted us some items, and he gave us all a big, massive box of Yorkshire tea as a bit of a joke present. But we were all like, "Oh, that's amazing, thanks, man." We all took it really well, we didn't see it as a joke. Anyway, on the car on the way back, Ravi turns around to us and he goes, "Oh, so seeing as how we got 3 boxes of tea, we'll split that and I'll take it all home, yeah." I was like, how's that? What?
I'm obsessed with tea.
To be fair, he is the biggest tea drinker here.
He is the biggest tea drinker here.
No, we didn't let him though, so just to put that out there. But we did an event in Thirst last weekend, Podcast Social Club. It was a really cool event.
Yeah.
First one they've done up there, and it was, it's great to get out to different parts of the country and the world as well. So if you did come down, great to see you there. And like Ravi said, we'll put the video on YouTube as well, so you can check it out there if you want a bit of extra Retro Hour podcast in your life this week. Right, let's get into this week's news stories then, because this one was really interesting. The Bitmap Brothers. Now, obviously, we've had Mike Montgomery on the show, didn't we? Very early episode, that one of our first. And they did some incredible games back in the day. I mean, really, for me, on the Amiga, they did some of my favourite games back then, stuff like Xenon, it was a great shoot-'em-up game. Chaos Engine.
Gods as well.
Yeah, Speedball. That is Speedball 2 particularly was an incredible game. But I mean, we've had a couple of kind of re-releases and upgrades over the years, but really not much has been done with the Bitmap Brothers brands until today. Now, Rebellion have actually acquired the Bitmap Brothers brand, and apparently, not only do they now own the former studio's entire portfolio of games, they have confirmed they're going to be bringing those classics to modern platforms. So I'm thinking Bitmap Brothers compilation for the Nintendo Switch.
That's my first thought straight away. Yeah.
Well, can I tell you about Rebellion? Because
Yeah,
they're absolutely amazing company. So I'm a big 2000 AD fan.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like a franchise that was kind of a bit lost. You know, they tried to release Judge Dredd movies in the 90s and stuff. It was a bit lost, but when Rebellion took it on, they did an absolutely fantastic movie that came out. They've reduxed a lot of the games. So they've done Rogue Trooper Redux. They've also got Judge Dredd vs. Judge Death. So we may be seeing like some Bitmap Brothers kind of films coming out of this, or even television series, as well as the original games, probably with Redux versions. And Rebellion do this stuff really, really well, taking these old kind of franchises, giving them a lick of paint, putting a new storyline out, and getting stuff done really, really well. Like, I don't know if any of you guys saw the Judge Dredd film, but it was all in 3D. It was fantastic.
Which one? The newest one?
Latest.
The latest one, the 2012 one. I mean, I love them both.
Yeah.
But in terms of like which is actually the better film, yes, the second one
Yeah.
is a really, really fantastic
So I think
film.
it's great because they've got every aspect covered here. They
Yeah.
can bring out the video games, comics, books, television as well, and film.
That Battlezone update they did for PlayStation VR as well, that was fantastic.
Oh,
Really
yeah,
good.
really
But they are
good.
saying not only are they going to, kind of get the old games on modern systems, but also they're going to make new titles based on its beloved licenses as well. So I mean,
Fantastic.
that's pretty much come on. That's Speedball 3 confirmed. Surely Chaos Engine HD. It's got to happen now, isn't it? So
Chaos Engine, the movie.
that would actually work well as a film,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
I think. So, yeah, it's great to see. I mean, Bitmap Brothers, they were always, it's kind of like Sensible as well. Back then, they were kind of the stamp of quality you'd look for in a game, and I just get anything that they did because I knew it was going to be good.
Well, look at the stuff that's come out and that's been revived recently.
Yeah.
If you look at like XCOM series, that was kind of really put into the shelves, hidden away, and then XCOM suddenly came out and became one of the biggest things, didn't it? So.
Yes, if you want to read more about that, I'll put that and everything else we talked about. We do it every week. All our stories are in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Maybe playing games is not enough for you. Maybe you actually want to go inside and become part of video games.
I don't know, I'd be pretty scared. Depends what game it is. Knowing my luck, I'd end up in bloody Aliens or something.
Joe has to live forever in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a new immersive gaming experience that's opened
Okay.
in London. And this is essentially, they're calling this a digital arcade booth where
Right.
you become part of classic games, including Pac-Man, which I think we talked about that recently, that being inside Pac-Man would be scary.
It
in
was like a
Florida, wasn't there? There was
Pac-Man maze,
A Pac-Man
wasn't it?
maze in
Yeah.
Florida, which is was over a Halloween they do every year. So that's interesting. There's one coming to London.
But this looks really, really different. So
Yeah.
it's kind of mad. They've got these like visor headsets on, and at the top of them, they've got these like little aerial things, but they look like old school TV kind of antennas.
Yeah, they look. I thought
Racketeers.
I assumed it was VR, but no.
But no, and they're kind of moving around the room, and as they move around the room, or move their head, I guess, they're
Yeah.
affecting how the game's played. It would be amazing to see how accurate this is, and it looks like it's like fully immersive. It's 360 all the way around them,
Yeah, it's
video
pretty cool.
screens.
Well, you walk into an empty room, and then apparently all these projectors come on, and they bring the room to life around you.
Yeah.
So then, you get, you become part of the game. You see it all around you. You are immersed in it. Multiplayer games in here. They've got stuff in there like, interactive games, challenges, memory tests, agility training as well. But also, you mentioned these antennas have got. That is so the system can track the player's position in the room.
Okay.
So it knows where they are. But it also means you can do stuff kind of like you can play Breakout. And you become the paddle and move and stuff like that. So that looks awesome. And also you can be Pac-Man and run around and collect, coins and stuff like that while avoiding ghosts in the room. So this looks loads of fun, actually. And I always love stuff like this. I mean, admittedly, they are a bit of a gimmick, but I think for multiplayer, getting your mates together,
Yeah.
going in here, it looks like such a
And
Yeah.
it's London South Bank and open to the public.
Yeah, it's called Electronic Theatre, if you want to go visit it, open in London now. Now, another story that's been making the headlines everywhere and, hopefully not incurring the wrath of Nintendo because they do have a little bit of a habit for kind of stomping on fan projects
It's only
like
a
this.
matter of time.
Well, get it in there before Nintendo take it down, Joe. What's happened with Super Mario Land?
So we've got a guy out here who's remained anonymous, which I think sometimes is the best thing to do when it comes to Nintendo.
Very wise.
Who has he has remade Super Mario Land, which is the original 1989 Game Boy version of Mario for the Super Nintendo, pretty much using assets from new Super Mario Brothers, for the Wii, the Wii U, and the Switch. And he's completely recreated the entire game by the looks of it. Like kind of not pixel for pixel, but like, sprite for sprite of Super Mario Land. So those people who are familiar with it, they got the Game Boy with Super Mario Land rather than Tetris, when a little bit later than Tetris. It looks superb, but apparently he's made it on his own from scratch using some, emulation and stuff like that. But he said it's not emulation or anything like that.
It's running natively.
It's running natively, yeah. But pretty much what it started out as is just a little, it's not. I'm going to call it a homebrew, but it's not a homebrew. He's made it from scratch. But it started out as just a little home project between him and his mates to celebrate the 30th. And I think somebody's pretty much dumped it online now by the looks of things. It looks pretty cool, and it runs really well. And it's even got like the bonus stage at the end of the level, with the ladders where you can pick if you're going to get the flower or the life, or do you know what I mean? It's pretty cool.
It looks very Game Boy Advance to me, but also like Donkey Kong Country when they did the kind of scanning of the
digitized
3D.
Yeah. I mean, it does it reminds me of the DS version of, new Super Mario Brothers. Like, that's probably the closest I can describe it, because obviously it doesn't look anywhere near as polished as, let's say, Mario Maker, because you could claim it's been made in Mario Maker or something, but you can tell from just looking at it hasn't been made in that.
Well, as with this, it might get taken down by Nintendo, but it hasn't been officially released for fans, but can be found on various forums and ROM sites.
Yes.
What were you saying about
Dodgy Ravi.
Dodgy Ravi, man.
Dodgy Ravi over here.
If anyone, just tweet Ravi if you want to get hold of it, unless you're Nintendo. Now, another title that's been really hyped in the world of retro, and it's another one of these projects that's been brought to life through fan passion, really, you could say. And this is Shenmue 3. And the reviews are in. It's getting good reviews.
You see, this is the thing. Me and Ravi were talking about this earlier on. I live and breathe retro gaming and stuff like that in games. I didn't even know it was out yet.
Right.
So I've not seen, it's not like I've not been online this week or anything. I've been online, I've been on YouTube and stuff. I've not really seen any adverts for it. And the thing is, we spoke about this quite a few times on the show.
Yeah.
And it's just not stuck with me, the release date and stuff like that. So I'm a little bit disappointed in myself. But apparently it's not done too well so far.
Well, it's weird because we've got an article here from the Metro, and they're kind of saying it fails to hit the top 10 of the latest UK sales chart, but it's still doing really well. And
it's number 17, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you made a point as well that there was 70,000 people that backed that as well, so maybe they're not actually
does that include,
counted as part.
Does
of
that include the 70,000? Yeah. I don't think it will either. But at the same time, what you've got to remember is Shenmue 1 and 2 didn't set the world on fire.
They were niche games.
It was a slow burner, wasn't it?
They were slow burners, and financially, in terms of critical acclaim, successful games, but in terms of financial games, I don't think they were that successful because they both had massive $100 million budgets, didn't they, or something mad like that. So I don't know. It's a tough one, but it looks nice.
Yeah,
because
the Metro
is
is
nice.
saying it's barely made a ripple in the UK physical sales charts at the moment.
I think again though, you were looking through the games that are in there. It's your Call of Duties.
Yeah,
and
I was
Mario
looking.
Kart is still in there.
But that's also physical sales as well. Actual. Yeah.
I mean, like you say, that's the disappointing thing. I'm looking through the top 10 chart, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still number 7, and Minecraft is still number 8.
Yeah,
I can believe that though. Yeah,
I can believe that as well. But it is. I guess it's a little bit disappointing to see that Shenmue hasn't overtaken that, because how many people are, you got to think if they're still in there, it's not like there's millions of people buying them games. Number 1's Call of Duty, number 2's a new Star Wars game. Yeah, millions of people are buying those games right now, but there isn't millions of people out there currently buying Mario Kart 8.
You know what I think that is? I think because obviously people are going out buying Christmas presents now, and if you're buying a Switch,
could be that.
Yeah,
could be that.
You're going to get that, aren't you?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, essentially, this Shenmue 3, it's a big indie game, really. It was crowd supported.
Yeah.
The fact that it's even in the top 20, I think, is impressive.
Yeah.
When you get up against games like that. So if you have played it, let us know what you think of it. We're on social media as well, of course. You can tweet us anytime at RetroOUK. Now, before we get into our chat this week with the Utah Saints, it's going to be a good one. The internet is obviously something that we spend a lot of time on these days, but it turned out back in the day, a lot of people in Britain weren't that confident that the internet would ever be a thing.
No, this is kind of crazy if you look at it now from our perspective. But there's an article here in The Sun that's talking about how there was a poll in the 90s that actually researched, adults and the use of the internet. And a lot of them were kind of saying, this is just going to be a small, little, quick thing. I've got some quotes here. And Michael Graham, 66 from Leeds, confessed he wasn't sure about the internet in the early days. He thought it was something more likely to be in sci-fi programs like Star Trek, and it shouldn't be in the homes of the nation. There's loads of little...
I agree with him.
Yeah, quotes like this. And, if you think about it, like, a lot of people thought it would be very hard for the older generations to get adapted to this new technology. And we've had to learn a hell of a lot. I think even the generations that are coming up after us aren't going to probably have as much understanding as the internet as the original people in the kind of .com boom, because they saw it come from scratch to kind of what it is nowadays.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So I guess, we've got experience of building GeoCities pages and Notepad and that back in the day. I guess now if you're a kid, the internet's just there, isn't it? It's like TV. You maybe, I don't know if you take it for granted almost. It's just always there.
It's just, like you say, I guess it's a difficult one because back in the day, people, decades ago and stuff, they would have seen TV in the same respect. Some people would have done, but like you say, now people, younger people and stuff like that, the internet's just the internet. It's just there,
and everything's so connected. Like smart meters,
light bulbs,
house, light bulbs, absolutely everything.
Washing machines on Wi-Fi.
And I can see what these guys are saying. I mean, you've got to put, like you said, in perspective. This was done back in the 90s, and a lot of these people are talking about. I mean, they're already in the 60s and stuff. Then what we class as silver surfers, I believe, are actually a big demographic online these days. But I mean, you probably would think it's, if you didn't grow up with computers and stuff, I can see why people might have thought it's just a bit of a novelty. So when the internet first came around, do you remember they were selling it as the internet? It was the information superhighway.
Yeah.
So you go on it, just be like, encyclopedias and stuff like that. So you wouldn't think that it would be as ingrained in our life today.
Well, a lot of people were saying, when it first came out, it seemed like it was a governmental service or it was a service for researchers.
Or like it wasn't library books.
Yeah, and it wasn't something for fun.
No, I guess so,
yeah.
Right, we've got our retro picks coming up in just a minute, and we'll go through this week's Hall of Fame as well.
Enjoying the show? Why not check out some other great retro gaming podcasts like Retro Asylum, RGDS, Maximum Power Up, Arcade Attack, Arcade Perfect, and the 10 Pence Arcade.
See, it's not just us. There are plenty of other retro gaming podcasts out there if you want to get your fix throughout the week as well. So all you've got to do is give them a quick search in your favourite podcast app. You'll find them. Now, let's give a big thank you to the people who allow us to come in and do the Retro Hour podcast for you every single Friday. Get these incredible guests, do these incredible events, and will keep us going into 2020. And these are people who found it in their lovely hearts to make a donation into the running of the show. And anyone that does that, I mean, it's dead easy to do it, Joe, isn't it? How do you get in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, bloody hell. You've got me again.
I have to test you on this.
So you go on our website.
Yep. What's your address?
www.retrohour.com.
That's retro.
TheRetroHour.com.
Sorry. So, theretrohour.com.
You'll learn, yeah.
I'll get there eventually one day. You see, this just goes to show how often I donate. And you have got a supporters tab in the top corner. You click on there and literally you can support through PayPal, any currency, you name it. Any sum of money goes directly straight back into the running of the show.
There you go. What do you think? B minus?
Yeah.
On the test?
Just needs to get the URL right.
Yeah, get the URL right, yeah. We'll test you next week again.
Yeah.
So exactly like Joe said, it's essentially a tip jar. So if you like what we do, throw a couple of quid in there, a couple of dollars, a couple of euros. Keeps us going into 2020. And for doing that, you'll get a shout on the show, just like Christian Dish,
Peter Matheson,
Gareth Murphy,
and Tom Fitzgerald, who all made donations into the running of the show. And you can do the same at
theretrohour.com.
That's the one.
Right,
let's do our retro picks. Now, these are every week. We do a little retro recommendation, stuff we've seen during the week. It could be videos, it could be games, it could be articles we've read. Kind of something that's maybe not, doesn't deserve a full news story. It's not that big, but something we find interesting. This week, I want to actually mention something that Ravi's been on this week. Now, this is our good friend Neil from Retro Man Cave. You're on a really interesting video with the Amigos podcast guys, Guru Meditation as well, talking about essentially memories of being an Amiga owner back in the day, but with a bit more of a US versus UK kind of slant, weren't you?
Yeah, because we always kind of talk about the UK, and it was really nice to see the the US perspective, how they got it from the shops, how they were kind of sold it. Because for us, there was a lot of Amiga around. For the US, it was like a very rare kind of obscure system. So we did a little kind of back and forth. It was a nice hour-long chat, quite casual paced. It was very nice.
I watched it over dinner earlier on. It was really interesting, actually, so you want to check it out. It's about an hour, like Ravi said. Link in the show notes. What have you been watching this week, then?
Yeah, so I've been watching this absolutely fantastic channel. It's called Radio Workshop, and the website is www.radioworkshop.co.uk. Now, this guy is absolutely amazing. He does amateur radio. He'll talk about all the kind of new stuff, like, these little Bluetooth radios that you can put in to convert your older ones, but he also tells stories of pirate radio from the 60s. And,
Dodgy Ravi.
There's some amazing stuff. There's this one story where they got this lady, and she had a transmitter in her pram, and she would push a pram pretending she had a baby in the park and then connect it to the aerial.
No way.
And then earth it into the ground as well. So there's loads of amazing tales on this one. So really recommend it if you want to sit down, cup of tea, and listen to some stuff about amateur radio.
What's your retro pick, Joe, this week?
So mine's an interesting one. So mine's actually a game I've been playing this week. It's not quite a retro. It's not a retro game. It's not a brand new game. It's a game called Minute. It actually came out last year. It's spelled MINIT, so Minute spelled IT. And it's a very interesting game, which is currently free on Xbox One Game Pass, which is why I kind of picked it up. A friend of mine recommended it. And it's got a real retro kind of look and vibe to it. It's a top-down adventure game, plays like the original Legend of Zelda game. But what it is essentially you're a cursed character and you can only live for a minute. Right. When a minute is up, you die, and you have to get as far as possible. But there's dungeons and only little dungeons and puzzles throughout the game, and it's very Monkey Island-esque. It's like there'll be a guy asking for water, so you go do a quest and you find a watering can, but then the watering can stays in your inventory after the minute is up. So it's just a really cool, cute little game. My wife really got into it as well. So if you're on Xbox One, it's on Game Pass at the moment for free, and it's on every other platform: Switch, PS4, Steam. I think it's only a couple of quid anyway.
Sounds challenging.
It is challenging. Yeah. It's good. I've spent about an hour or so on it. Apparently, it's only about 3-4 hours long anyway. Really interesting game. If you just want a little retro fix.
That sounds well cool.
Now, before we get into our chat this week, you're actually going to be an event this weekend, Retro Computer Museum in Leicester, Christmas party.
Yeah, so that will be tomorrow on Saturday, and I'm going to be DJing there till about 8 o'clock. We're going to be doing a party, starts at 10. It's a £10 donation on the door, and it's all to support the Retro Computer Museum Leicester.
Then you're going to have to get wrecked.
No, I'm just going to have a drink with... Don't make me sound too bad. Dodgy Ravi gets wrecked.
A few nice drinks in town afterwards. Yeah. I can't make it. I'm out with the family. I'd rather be at the Retro Computer Museum than out with the family. But yeah, if you are going down, have an amazing time. I'll put a link to everything we mentioned there in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now let's chat to this week's very special guest, all about the wonderful world of retro gaming, amazing dance music back in the day. This week's guest from the Utah Saints, Tim and Jez. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome our very special guest this week, always our favourite part of the show. And this week we're joined by two absolute legends. I've got to say it, Jez and Tim from the Utah Saints. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us. That's cool. That's good that we don't get that very often.
I was going to say, but you've never heard that before.
No.
Well, I mean, people will be aware of your incredible career in dance music. And they might be thinking, so why are you guys on a retro gaming podcast then? But you guys have actually got quite a big history with gaming. I mean, starting with you, Jez, I mean, what originally got you into video games or computers, and what kind of started it all for you?
I got into electronic music, really. And I'd heard I Feel Loved by Donna Summer, and I couldn't work out how they'd done it. And I could play a little bit of piano, but that was about it. And Yamaha brought out a music computer, and which was really intriguing. They brought out a thing called a CX5, and it didn't really do any games, but it had a behemoth of a horrible. Well, no, it wasn't horrible, but it was a sequencer where you had to go from literally to do one thing. You had to go through about 3 different screens, and then go back to the original screen and keep the original screen what it looked like in your head while you went and changed what you did. So in itself, it was a bit like a game, basically, starting that. And Tim will tell you this, is that I get quite stressed making music and worried. This is a bit of an exclusive, actually, because I don't really mention it much, but I get a little bit when you're making something, you get big self-doubt about whether it's any good or not. And to kind of counteract that, I'm really bad for distracting myself with a computer game. So the first album probably took an extra week because of Tetris, something really simple like that. And like I say, full credit to Tim, the other half of Utah Saints, for putting up with that.
I wonder how many kind of projects and stuff were delayed because of Tetris. It's like the amount of man hours lost in jobs around the world due to that game.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Tim, then? What was kind of your start in computers and like your favourite old school games and stuff then?
So I was quite geeky. I remember having I had the ZX80 and the ZX81, the Sinclair, and I used to go buy a magazine from the shop called Computer and Video Games, and they used to print out all the games, and you'd have to type everything in. You put in all the code, and then you hit go at the end, and then it didn't work because you'd missed a space out in one little lettering, or just it was so technical. So that was my first sort of entry into it, and then I just couldn't be doing with it. So the first ever game I got was a thing called Intellivision, which was by Mattel, and everybody else all my friends were playing the Atari, and my dad got me, because they were a little bit more expensive. They were about, I remember at the time they were like £200, and that's a lot of money for a game back then, and it's a lot of money now, so it's equivalent to probably about £600-700. But I got one of those for Christmas, and I was totally hooked on it.
Just while Tim was talking there, I remember that Sonic the Hedgehog, and when you talk about Sonic the Hedgehog now to people, and say when you switch the game off, you lost all your progress. I can just see people's faces of disbelief. But that was again something in which once you embarked on that, you had to keep going for several hours to get to the end, as you may or may not know.
Yeah, we had to leave the actual machine on, so we'd do a level, leave it on for a day, and then go back and then play the other level.
Yeah. I think I've got a memory from when I was a kid of the TV setting itself on fire. So ever since then, I've got a slight paranoia about leaving things on overnight.
Well, I've been talking about computers that you used in your production. The Atari ST. I know so many producers credit that computer as being a big part of developing their sound and integral in their studio. Was that a big machine for you guys in the ST?
Yeah, we had the Atari 520 and the 1040. All our first album was done on it. So What Can You Do For Me? Our very first track was done on Atari, running Cubase, and so everything was basically MIDI'd out of that because it had the built-in MIDI port. So it was great for that, and the timing. We say by this now, swear by this now, that the timing on the Atari is still as tight as anything out there now. And when we switched over to Macs, we felt like the MIDI timing on the Atari was still better. So it was a massive part of us. And What Can You Do For Me was made basically with an Atari running Cubase, an Akai S950, which had about 15 seconds of sampling time, and then we saved everything on floppy disk. Yeah,
because I know a lot of people say that. Cause other machines, like when you got the PC or the Mac, they needed sound cards and that kind of thing on MIDI cards that you slotted in, but the ST had them on board. And I noticed actually I was watching a video of Fatboy Slim's studio, and he's still got an ST in there.
Yeah, and he had a pretty similar setup to us, and he actually switched over quite late in the day, because I remember things like Rockefeller Skank and Praise You and that, they were all made, as far as I'm aware, he still made those using all the outboard gear, and he was using the Atari, and it's only really late in the day that he switched over. And it's kind of one thing I've always been wanting to do, because we've still got all that equipment, and the Atari, we've got about 5 or 6 Ataris, and they just about start up. Sometimes you have to kind of switch it on and you leave it for about 40 minutes and you can just about boot it up. But it's really tempting just to get everything out again and just try and recreate a track on it, or just make something, because it was great fun making records that way. You were limited with the equipment you had, so you had to be kind of your ideas. It's all about the idea, which it still is now. But whereas sometimes now you can just draw from so much stuff and use plugins for this, plugins for that. You just, if you've got just like a computer running the MIDI and a little sampler, then it's only got 15 seconds of sampling time. You've got to be really creative to make a whole track out of that.
Well, when Cubase came out, was it completely revolutionary for you? Because I know we had bars and pipes on the Amiga, but Cubase coming out must have kind of made you change your setup, expand, add more effects.
What did you use before Cubase? You used something else, didn't you?
It was the Yamaha CX5 I was talking about, and then we moved to a very basic thing called Steinberg. It was made by the same people who make Cubase, but it was Steinberg 12 or 12-track thing or a 24-track thing. I went for the 12-track because it was cheaper. But basically, I mean, the reason the Atari was kind of, completely solid was that it had a MIDI port out, and you just ran a sequencer from the Atari, and then everything else was chained together with a whole kind of labyrinth of MIDI cables. So you hit go on the Atari, and it just sent all this information right out to all the outboard. And everything's done in a box now, but at the time, the Atari was kind of the brains of it. And it was a big shift for us because it meant that we could do more tracks and we could work a little bit quicker as well. So it was the early Cubase was a real revolutionary shift.
And I think there is something about using real hardware as well. I mean, I think Chemical Brothers' recent album, they went back to using physical hardware rather than, just Pro Tools, that kind of thing. So yeah. I guess there is something like, a bit warmer about using actual hardware.
There's a massive revival. I mean, if you look at the moment, there's a company called Behringer, and I was talking to Jazz about this earlier today, a company called Behringer, and they've made like clones of everything, like the 303, the Roland 808, and they're well made and they're really good. And they've made a Moog one as well, and an SH101 Roland and stuff. So all the classic analog units that were brought out in the day that people were using, you can get modern day versions of them now, which are all really, really good. And so there's a massive revival on that. And people kind of went through a period of using loads and loads of plugins, but I think it is going back to a lot more hardware now.
Well, talking about that, you kind of mentioned you've still got your STs. Do you dust them off and pull them out when you need to do a remix, load up the original sound files?
Yeah, we do. Because a few years ago we did a remix of, we brought What Can You Do For Me out again in 2011, and we had to get the Atari out then and just to try and get the MIDI stuff. And a lot, it's scary though, because literally 50% of your floppy disks, you just load them and it'll say bad data, and that's game over. So sometimes, luckily, we did make quite a few backups in the day, but half the stuff has just gone through time, and half of it is still there. So if we can find it and track it down, then we use it again. But we did save absolutely everything. We've got all the DATs and we've got all the floppies. But like I say, half of them have kind of just worn out basically over time.
That's the thing with physical media, though, isn't it? It's got a shelf life.
Yeah, it has, and I think. It's weird though, because I think it'd be interesting to see what happens with digital stuff, because I think people will lose loads of stuff as well, because computers. A lot of people don't. I mean, it's the most basic thing, but a lot of people don't back up the hard drives, and then you can just store everything on, like music, photos, everything, and then suddenly a computer can die, and you can just lose everything. And I think there'd be a massive void, looking back in the future of stuff that's just missed.
Well, you guys obviously ran some clubs back in the day as well. I mean, how much did kind of the rave and computer scene cross over back then?
Well, yeah, we basically both started out as DJs, and like Jess said, he was an industrial band, but he did DJ as well. And I DJed. I was in like the Technics DMC thing back in like '87, and then '88 I did it again, and I kind of got into the sort of last 10. So I did pretty well in that. But yeah, the whole DJ thing for me, I was kind of like a culture person, because I just loved all the things like skating, skateboarding when I was at school. I loved DJing, I love computer games, and and I was always kind of like the weird kid. And so I do always see a massive link, with those kind of things.
Well, I love that you were in the DMC stuff, because back in those days they had I remember seeing a video of a Russian guy remixing with two reel-to-reel tapes and kind of scratching on it.
Yeah, and then it kind of, the thing about the DMCs is you have to just. It's like anything you do now, if you want to be the best at it, you have to devote. It's like you can DJ and do a bit of scratching, but if you want to be the best, you can't. It's very difficult to sort of produce music and go out and do other things. You just have to stay in your room and scratch all day. That's like if you do computer games and you want to do the best computer games, you have to sit in your room all day and just concentrate on that. Because to be the best in whatever you do you know what I mean? It's like you can have a good sort of skill rate of everything, but to be the best. And I realised MC thing. You kind of don't get nothing for coming second in that. You win it and you do really well, and everybody knows about you, and you can kind of get a career off it. But if you come second, no one's interested.
And just to pick up on the club thing as well, within Utah Saints, we always had a really tech savvy kind of people who are into music tend to be very tech savvy, and as a result, I could still remember they'd always be interested in technology. And I can remember one guy in America turning up, and he'd made an entire jacket out of circuit boards. Although, as a fashion item, it perhaps wasn't the kind of at the top of the fashion tree. It was very interesting.
So did you have any guys actually like going into the hardware and like looking at it at all? Because I remember a lot of the reggae artists used to build their own synthesizers, and that would create some kind of crazy sound, and like dub came out of that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we only circuit bent things by accident. Usually it's just like we broke something and then it started making a different noise. But we didn't do anything on purpose.
You know, when using the ST to create these big hits back in the day, I mean, did you do much post-production on the tracks then afterwards?
Basically, we used to have to, whereas now you can kind of like recall a mix. You can do a mix and you can finish it and you think, right, I'll just listen to it in the morning, check it on fresh ears, and you just switch everything on and you saved it. What we had to do back then in the day was everything was coming up a big desk. So we'd do the track and we'd put it down and we'd send it off to London. We'd go down to the station, put it on the Red Star on a DAT. So it'd go on the train overnight and arrive in London in the morning. And then sometimes if we had to get on with another job in between, we'd have to just almost like take a photo of the desk. We'd want to get on with something else. And if someone came back and go, oh, you need to go back to that mix and change it, we'd have to try and replicate what we had exactly. We'd never get it exactly the same.
Well, also, where did you guys get those kind of screaming crowd samples from? Because I used to play a lot of games, and like when you'd win, a screaming crowd sample would come up that sounds pretty similar to the ones that's in a lot of tunes.
Allegedly similar.
Allegedly.
we couldn't possibly tell you where we got our crowd samples from. So allegedly things sound similar. Back when we started, there was a lot of confusion about sampling, and people used to say, oh, you could take this much and it's fine, you could sample 2 seconds or whatever, but that's never been the case. Every sound is copyrighted once it's embedded, so we would never, of course, sample something that we weren't supposed to. But again, I've just remembered something about the tech savvy audience as well, is that what I can tell you, and again, I don't think we've told anybody this, but Steve Lamacq used to be on Radio 1, and he used to do it was the earlier days of the internet, so I don't know when it would have been, maybe late 90s, something like that. And he used to do a thing where you could vote for a track, and he would play the track that got the most votes would get played. And I can't remember. But anyway, they had 4 tracks, and it was all a bit of kind of just a bit of fun, really, because he always used to play all 4 tracks anyway. It's just that whichever one won, he would play at a certain time. And then so some of our more tech-savvy kind of people who are into Utah Saints would somehow manage to make some little JavaScripts, which they then could just leave on all night. So if we got involved with, say, a couple of guitar bands and there was a competition to who got the most votes, they would get like, I don't know, 1,000 or maybe 1,200, and ours would be pushing 20,000 because we had this little JavaScript going all night. So, there was definite advantages of having a kind of that link between technology, games, and just generally people who are interested in technology.
Well, speaking of games, I mean, if people have a look on YouTube, and I'll put a link in our show notes, you're actually on Games Master. Now, you're on there, and you actually won a golden joystick.
Yeah.
Tim won the golden joystick.
Yes.
I'm over it now, but Tim won it.
Yeah. So, and the thing was, and I remember that day really well, and because it was so bad day for Jez, because I remember after I had to go. That was filmed down in Oxford, and it was filmed in the prison at Oxford, which is now, I think, Mount Mason Hotel. And afterwards, I had to go to a wedding that day, so I kind of blew the wedding out, which is people who are into Games Master totally understand why you blow a wedding out to go on Games Master to get the golden joystick, which is more important than the wedding. So, but I had to get back to the wedding, so and the wedding was near Leeds, so I got a taxi, but I didn't have any money, so Jez lent me the money for the taxi. And I remember it was like 150 quid it was, and I found the receipt last year.
So I still haven't got it back.
It's sent it back.
But the game itself being on Games Master was a brilliant experience, though.
We didn't have any. It was WWF wrestling, and I think I was Randy Savage. I remember that because of the name.
You zoomed in on that name as well. Yeah.
So we got about 5 minutes to play it before, and I remember, and then they just went through and filmed it, and somehow I won because I didn't know very well the combinations that you're supposed to use, but somehow I won, and I got a golden joystick, which then I took home. I thought, this is awesome. I put it on I put it on private place in the lounge, and mysteriously, when I went away on tour and I came back, it had disappeared. And my wife put it in the loft. Not my wife, my girlfriend, sorry, at the time, put it in the loft, and it was lost for about 15 years, and then I found it a few years ago, so I kind of pulled it out again. And now someone else has taken it, and it's around someone else's house. So basically, to cut a long story short, I went to school with it's weird because I lived in the middle of nowhere, and I went to school with Jason Bradbury who used to do the Gadget Show.
Yeah.
So we went to the same junior school, and I'd always kind of kept in touch with him. So Jason's sort of he lives about 20 miles away from me now, but so he saw it. He came over and he didn't realise I had a golden joystick, so he's got it now. And he's used it for some of his content. So if you go on Jason's Instagram, you'll see a nice picture of a golden joystick, and that's my one.
Well, on the day, you're right. You turn up and you don't. They switched. They told us we were playing one game, and then about 5 minutes before we were due on, they switched the game. I don't know if it was a legal thing or just so that we didn't get in some sneaky practice. But it was a wrestling game, and we weren't at that point. We were more used to racing games, to be honest. So it was a little bit out of our comfort zone. I'm just making excuses for why I lost, actually. But also it was great because it was Dexter Fletcher.
Yeah.
And Dexter Fletcher was he's we've always been a big fan of Dexter Fletcher as well, and he's obviously gone on to big film things and that type of thing. But the whole thing had a really nice vibe to it. It was obviously they get in a load of kids basically and just tell them to make as much noise as they possibly could, and kids love making noise, so it was an easy job, and it was within the kind of acoustic setting of an old prison. It was just the loudest thing when people started screaming. And then of course the guy comes up to present the golden joystick, and we all got really worried because he was massive.
It comes out of the floor, yeah. But yeah. I mean, the thing about Games Master, why I thought it was cool, because I thought it was always, back in the day, it was always quite hard, I thought, to do a TV show on video games and make it look interesting for TV. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like technology-wise and just the way things worked on telly, just to make it look exciting and and make a success out of a program, because it ran for quite a few years. I thought, and that was kind of like one of the early first shows that did that, and actually managed to get computer games onto sort of primetime TV.
Well, also talking of primetime TV, kind of Something Good got really popular, and it was used as the opening for the 1992 Barcelona Olympics by the BBC. That must have been pretty amazing to be sitting watching the Olympics and hearing your tune coming out. Yeah,
I'm surprised. Well done finding that, because that we've never been asked about that. But yeah, that happened, and basically the reason it was amazing was that everyone was tuned in because it was just such an amazing opening ceremony, and they used the first. I've always been a big fan of the band Queen, and the first track they used was Freddie Mercury singing Barcelona, and then it segued into our track. So it was just, I think with Utahs, we're always about moments. We always really try and make some kind of moment musically, and that was a big moment for us because it was just such a very emotional kind of opening with the music on there. It's fantastic.
I know back then a lot of your kind of videos had quite like psychedelic digital effects and stuff. I mean, were you aware much of like the demo scene, because it seemed like there was quite a bit of crossover there, like similar styles.
Yeah, one of our videos, I think it's Believe in Me. We kind of used like a lot of like virtual reality, and looking at stuff now, it's weird because you look back and like Believe in Me was in '93, I think. So I look back at the video now, and what we were kind of wanting to do, because we had lots of ideas of stuff we wanted to do, but we felt the technology kind of wasn't where we kind of envisaged it in our head of what the ideas we wanted to do. So it was frustrating. So kind of did, and obviously we're working within limited budgets.
Yeah, I mean, we were always trying to get to, it was, I mean, when we look back, it was pretty frustrating, to be honest, because we always had loads of ideas for things, but it was just so expensive to do. And it looks ridiculous now when you think of how expensive it was. So in an effort to get around that, actually, we put an advert out saying, do you want to be in Utah Saints? Tell us what you do, basically. and we'll try and make something happen. But that kind of backfired. We thought we were being really smart by putting adverts in random places. Like we put one in Farmers Weekly and as well as the music papers and the tech magazines and stuff. And we got quite a lot back in the day, letters. Quite a lot of letters. And through that, we did get a couple of people who were sort of making fairly, at the time, cutting edge things, mostly on Amiga, actually. Amiga used to be good for kind of those computer graphic visual things.
Yeah.
Because the guy did when we went on tour. I mean, at the time, it was cool because we just took the TV screens and we placed them all over the stage. And we got a friend of ours to do some visuals and that, and he did them all on the Amiga. But it was cool because we wanted to create an effect like the whole stage was moving left to right. So at the time, it was kind of, for the budget we had and what we were doing, it was quite cutting edge. But, whereas now look at Eric Prydz and the Chemical Brothers, what they're doing, and, it's like mind-blowing.
Yeah, and mentioning the Amiga there as well, there was a game for the A500, Burning Rubber, and they had a really cool Utah Saints intro. I remember that. How did that happen?
Well, it's funny, that one, because that is, like I said, we were making a list of the games we're trying to remember, and I, until 5 minutes before this call, I did not even know we were on that game. So you maybe could tell me about that game, because I have no idea what it's about. Obviously, it's a car game, I think.
Yeah, well, I read that the guys were in a gig in Newcastle, a Utah Saints gig, quite a small one, and they ran up to the manager and managed to get his number, and then eventually that kind of intro happened. It was totally different compared to the game, But
right, no, that's cool, because we had a mad Scottish manager who probably just agreed to it, and and it happened. But I didn't know about that. So that's awesome, though. But I'm going to go and check it out properly, though. Now.
Yeah, the game itself was kind of just like an outrun kind of game, wasn't it? A racing game.
Yeah, because I loved outrun anyway. So I will check it out, because there's a place, and we haven't been to it in Leeds, and it's called Arcade Club, and it looks wicked because it's got. I saw a video. So there's a guy in there, and it's one of these places. It's got all the every single old machine and pinball, and you can just pay a fixed price and go in, and you can play games all night without having to put money in. So just everything's free after you've paid your entrance fee. I thought that's a genius idea, because it's got all the old machines. It's got outrun in there.
Yeah,
I saw a video of a guy walking off the street, and he just sat down at outrun, and he finished it straight off, and I was like, that's impressive, because I never finished outrun. It's like I never finished. There was one game in my life. Well, there's two games in my life, because there's a game called Scramble that I used to love, and I never finished Scramble. And then when we were making our second album, we were in the studio in London called Olympic, and there was a game that me and Jez both got addicted to called Skitching. So Skitching, if you Google it, Skitching is inline roller skating. So you roller skate down this road, and then it was in America, and you hang onto the back of a car, and then you get momentum, and then you kind of release from the car, and then you go to another car, and then you knock people over and stuff like that. So it's kind of like an early Grand Theft Auto. It's so good, but and I had quite a cool little soundtrack and that, and I think it was on the Sega. But yeah, if you check it out, it's called Skitching.
So you guys were involved with the launch of the Philips CDI. How did that go?
Well, that was interesting, because basically just a little bit of context. We'd had 3 top 10s, and and we'd sold probably, I don't know, 250,000 albums in America and about 100,000 here. So things were going pretty well, and we'd made all that music on the basic equipment we were talking about earlier in a small studio in Leeds, which is, which had a very basic setup, and we made all those tracks, and so we but we were still a bit unsure about how that had happened. So the record company were really keen on both sides of the Atlantic, the American record company and the UK one, to get us into a big studio with a big producer. So we moved down to London and went into a big studio called Olympic, which is a really famous big studio. It had 4 rooms in it, and had a little programming room, which was kind of new for them, in the basement. So we rented that because it was the cheap way to be in that building. And we just sort of started working there. And I think we kind of lost our way a little bit, because 3 things happened. One was that the record company over here, the KLF had split up, and the record company over here were kind of going, you guys sound a bit like the KLF, you should kind of try and do something like the KLF. And we're thinking, no, we should try and do something like the Utah Saints, really. And then to the American record company, Nine Inch Nails were just number 1 in America, and they kind of wanted us to take a harder direction. And then the Prodigy put out either Generation or Fat of the Land. I can't remember which one came out.
Yeah, Generation.
Generation. They put it out when we were in the studio, and we were like, our stuff isn't. I thought our stuff isn't as good as this. Whereas what we've been saying is we do our own stuff, and we're not trying to compete with the Prodigy. But that album was so amazing that I was just thinking, right, we need to really up our game. So we had. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that the result of that was quite a long process. In amongst all that, Philips were launching a CDR, and in their words, they wanted 2 underground cutting edge bands, and we were one of them. I can't remember who the other one was. And then 2 megastars, and they were talking the megastars they were talking about for the launch were people like Elton John or Michael Jackson, so those kind of status people. So they said to us, "Can you come up with the idea for a game?" And they hooked us up with a programmer from Cambridge called Dan somebody. I've got his second name now. But anyway, can you come up with an idea for a game? So we looked at the technology, and we worked out that we had a track called Train, which has never come out actually, which was built around samples from an Intercity 125.
Right.
So we used the horn for the main riff, and all the drums were constructed from doors shutting and clanking of trains. And then we'd recorded a train shooting from left to right, and that was a big whoosh for the track and stuff like that. Anyway, the whole track was based around that, and we wanted to make a game called Train. So because also that got around the loading issues, because based around CD, so I had to keep loading information off the CD depending on. It's a bit like Choose Your Own Adventure. If you went a certain direction, it would load a certain bit of the game, and if you went a different direction, it would load a different part of the game. But every time that happened, the screen would fade to black. So to get around that, because we didn't want that in our game we were associated with, we based it around a train and said that every time the train went into a tunnel, everything went completely black. But what actually it was doing was loading up the next part of the game. Anyway. So we found ourselves in London with Philips in one of their big exec rooms, me and Tim and our manager, and a lot of people. I don't know. I think they were quite high-ranking people. There were a lot of suits going on in this meeting, and they just asked us to kind of give a load of ideas to get this.
We just gave them loads of crazy ideas, and
yeah. So I can remember about 3 of them, and this is like early '90s. So bear in mind, none of this kind of existed. But we were saying, right, we want to make a game that takes in your entire peripheral vision. So it's got some kind of combination of, we hadn't thought of a curved screen, but we thought of a combination of about 8 screens going around your head sort of thing. So that it was an immersive experience. And then we wanted to, again, it shows at the time, but we wanted to plug something into the printer port that you put on your tongue that gave you little electric shocks. so you tasted and smelt things as you went through the game. And then I always remember this because off the top of my head, we just said, bit like electronic chewing gum, and I just remember about 5 people all writing down electronic chewing gum. so we were really, really excited about the launch of that. And of course, then what happened was our album got delayed. The CDI testing it just got usurped by Nintendo and those kind of things coming out. So it was a shame because it was quite a good idea, and a lot of money. Philips put a lot of money into the R&D of it, but it never quite got to where it should.
Yeah, I think I remember reading they lost like $1 billion on CDI.
Wow.
Yeah, but they really tried.
Get any of that.
I really want to play the tongue taser game, though. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
No, because at the same time, I remember because we renegotiated our contract, and I remember sitting in the meeting and we were trying to get something in our contract for. Because they did different royalty rates for CDs and cassettes and vinyl, and we were trying to negotiate a royalty rate because we said in the future there'll be no moving parts, and they were like nah, and they wouldn't put anything in. So obviously now music's on USB, and but at the time they were like, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, we were trying to present. It's called future formats, and we were trying to generally future formats to recoup R&D in record contracts. Generally, future formats would have a 0 royalty rate, and so basically you kind of said, if something new comes along, we won't take any royalties on it. And as Tim said, we were sitting there going, at some point there might even be music players without any moving parts, and that kind of got dismissed as never going to happen, like Tim said. So it was a weird time to be involved in technology because the ideas were kind of moving faster than the technology could keep up with, if that makes sense.
Also, Mortal Kombat was a hell of a game as well. And you guys were involved in the movie soundtrack, doing a Utah Saints kind of take on it.
Yeah, that's kind of partly how this thing came around, actually, because I was talking to a guy, a really cool DJ called Lee Futurecast, and he hit me up the other week, and he said, "Were you involved in Mortal Kombat?" Because he didn't know, and I said, "Yes, we were." And I was talking about it, and then he sent me this little video clip, and I nothing about this thing called trackers, where people kind of recreate original movie, original video games on a tracker. And so he sent me this clip of somebody playing the track from the Mortal Kombat soundtrack that we did for the end of the movie. And he said that people were kind of discussing this on a forum in the dark depths of the internet. So, it was really cool that we did it. Now, I'm really pleased we did it. But at the time, both me and Jazz didn't want to do it because we didn't like the riff from the game. And we had to use the riff from the game, you see. So finally, we thought, okay, we'll do it. So we went into the studio outside Leeds and spent 2 or 3 days on it. And then it ended up being on soundtrack. And funnily enough, that is... Out of all the, we've been on lots of compilations. We've got quite a few gold discs, silver discs, and that. It's the first time we've ever actually got a disc. So it had pride of place in our studio because the actual soundtrack ended up selling over 1 million copies.
Were you fans of the game?
Yes. We had it on the Mega Drive. Didn't it come out with a certificate? Wasn't there a bit of an outcry about it being too gruesome or something?
I think that was like one of the games that introduced certificates. Yeah, they brought them in because of that game.
Yeah. I mean, again, when you look back on it and just, it sounds like we're talking about something like 400 years ago, but it's odd that it wasn't that long ago, and you wonder where we're going to be in 25 years' time, and we're just going to zap information via our eyes or something. I don't know. And how we play games is going to be completely different. But yeah, that game, it was because of the way some of the characters got, the head fly off or something.
Fatality moves, you could rip the spine out and all sorts.
Yeah, that was it.
Well, you also did some soundtracks for other games, so like Carmageddon, TDR 2000, also Wipeout Fusion. How did you get involved in these titles, and what were the differences needed in creating a game kind of tune or soundtrack compared to an album?
Well, Carmageddon, TDR 2000, for starters, was particularly pleased with that because we did this track called Hands Up, and we sampled Nick Cave, basically. And nobody really sampled Nick Cave at that point, and I don't know if they have since, but we've done it. We've made sort of effectively a 160 BPM Gabba track, which is not the way a lot of people perceive. It's not a track that people would immediately associate with us. I think we played the record company, and as a joke, kind of said, "Yeah, we've got another 5 like this," and they just went a bit white, as a bit kind of. They looked a bit shocked, basically, and sort of because they didn't want tracks like that. But it fitted for that game. It fitted really well. How all these things come about, sometimes it's who knows each other, but we didn't have any direct contact with the game developers at all. But we were just so happy to get tracks on these kind of games because they were kind of quite a lot of these games were kind of fairly cutting edge at the time as well.
Well, one really cutting edge title was Vib Ribbon, which was like this kind of crazy game where you could put your own music CDs in and then notes would turn into the levels and you were this mad rabbit. How did you get involved with that?
As soon as someone says exactly the words you just said, we're there.
Vib Ribbon, I really liked it because it was, I just really liked the look of the game because it was all like vector music generated graphics, and the earlier vector games that I'd always kind of liked because I was massive on Asteroids and Battlezone back in the day. So it kind of reminded me of that. And I like the idea that the actual game was generated by the music. So I think that you could put your own songs. Is that because I know we had a track on there called Power to the Beats, which sampled Metallica, Enter Sandman, and it also had a vocal from Chuck D from Public Enemy, who actually did the vocal for that track for us. And so the track was Power to the Beats, and so we ended up doing a video for that track, and it was cool because we used actually footage from the game in our video. So I was always surprised because I think that game's more of a cult game. It never was a massive game, but I think it's quite a cult game.
Yeah, because I think you could select the tracks that were already on there, but then additionally put your CD in, and the tracks would be a lot harder than the ones that are originally on it because it would just be a generated kind of sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was all responding to the music, wasn't it? The game, and on the surface of it looked very simple game. Because I remember there was quite a lot of debate about whether was it a Sony game? I think.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of debate about whether or not it was too simple for a game, and it wasn't. The graphics were too basic, but it was a really addictive game as well. It was really clever.
Well, guys, you've always been at the cutting edge. It's been wonderful to kind of get these stories about, your history and the amazing experiences that you've had during your career. What were you guys working on at the moment then?
We did Radial G. We did a game called Radial G for the Oculus more recently. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like it came out about 2-3 years ago, and it's basically for the Oculus, and it's a little bit like Wipeout, and it had that feel to it. So we did a track for that. And then we're currently working on new Utah Saints things. We work very, very slowly. And then, to be honest, a lot of that is to do with just when we feel it's right to start making music. And at the moment, there's a big movement for kind of the sound where we started. And we know that sound really well, and we know the music really well. So it just seemed fairly obvious for us to start properly making music again, which is what we're doing now.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's been a big 90s revival in the last couple of years.
Yeah, we were in the car going to an event, and every single sample was kind of 90s remixes.
On Radio 1, yeah, everything we heard on New Music, it was all 90s samplers.
Yeah. It's like 90s, it's 90s stuff, but it's kind of done with like different production and and a kind of modern take on it. But it's weird because we were there at the start and we were making it, and we're still out DJing, and we curate a stage at a festival called Beat Herder, which is up in Lancashire. So we're still kind of right on top of the music, and like we haven't put anything out as Utah Saints properly since 2011. But we only sort of feel like we want to put something out when we feel we've got something to say. And we've kind of both gone off and done different things. Like I've got my own label, and Jazz been back to do his masters. So it's kind of like we had other projects kind of we wanted to do, but we kind of just got back into studio and started doing some new music. So we're hopefully going to get that out next year. It'd be nice to do some more video games as well, because the only thing I find about the video thing is now that a lot of the games they're almost like feature film productions, and they've all kind of got their own internal sort of network of things. So the music, so I understand that. So it's a different approach now taken with the games, I think. But it would be nice to do something again, because we did, the FIFA 2001. So maybe FIFA 2021, 20 years on, it'd be awesome to have a track on that.
They need to get on it.
Yeah, they do.
Well, Tim, James, it's been a pleasure having you both on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very
wicked.
much, and keep up the good work.